There are a couple of properties that already existed in pdfToolbox when I joined Callas software 20 years ago. Yeah, when I joined Callas software, there already were properties in PDF Inspector at that time. Object uses black with a percentage off, and so forth. And all of them annoyed me now for 20 years that they ignored ICCbased CMYK. So once in a while, you have a CMYK object, and you want to know whether that particular, or you want to find all CMYK objects that somehow use, let's say, black with a certain percentage. You will find them as long as they use device CMYK. But if they use ICCbased CMYK, you wouldn't find them, which in a way makes sense, because if it's ICCbased CMYK, they are destined to possibly being color converted, and then you don't know what the result is. However, once in a while, you know anyway that you are going to ignore the source color space. So basically, you will treat them as device CMYK anyway. And then now that becomes possible to include those objects. All of these 8 properties have gotten a new check mark, which is off by default. So if you're using them, already use them in your profiles, nothing is going to change. But you have the ability now to include ICCbased CMYK here. Then that's that. And then we are going to the next one, and I think that is the last one requires a little bit of explanation, and that is about mapping of device CMYK to ICCbased CMYK. Yeah, indeed, there is some explanation needed. In PDF, you have a mechanism. As I've just said, you can have device CMYK and you can have ICCbased CMYK. And in order to make a CMYK object ICC-based CMYK, you would usually just attach the ICC source profile to that object. However, there is an easier mechanism that works on a page or in a FormX object. You can, in the FormX object, specify a color space with the name default CMYK, so that you need to give it the name default CMYK, and then if that default CMYK uses an ICC-based, is an ICC-based color space, any CMYK objects on that page are treated as if they would have been directly tagged with that ICC profile. And that is just a shortcut for a creator of a PDF file to tag all the CMYK objects on a page with an ICC profile. So once you've understood that mechanism, then we can get to the next point here in PDF 2.0. So just in the most recent PDF specification, a similar mechanism exists for transparency blend groups. So the transparency blend color space can also work as a default CMYK color space. That means if you would convert a PDF file, if you would just change the header in the PDF file to PDF 2.0, potentially the CMYK objects that existed in the original file are out of a sudden ICC-based thereafter, because then in the PDF 2.0 file, this remapping mechanisms gets established. Yeah? So it's really a detail, but it may be important for you to know whether this will happen if you convert the file to PDF 2.0. And in order to allow you to find out whether there is this potential risk when you convert the PDF file to PDF 2.0, there is a new check now that says CMYK object redefined to ICC-based CMYK via its transparency group. It's a complicated name. and maybe it's too complicated for this hour, but it just, if you deal or if you start to deal with PDF 2.0, at one point it may be important for you to understand that you have the ability to double check whether there are any CMYK objects that would be converted to ICC-based CMYK just if you would convert that file to PDF 2.0. And if you want to do that yourself, so if you want to say, okay, I want to establish or kind of have that mechanism already in an earlier version of PDF, you could use a Fixup that you already have in pdfToolbox 13, resolve ICC-based default color spaces into object color spaces, which would then take the ICC profile out of the transparency group and tag all objects in the transparency group directly. Yeah. Maybe for now it's enough to understand there is some complicated things going to happen when you move to PDF 2.0, and then PDF Toolbox already is prepared for that. And you are, if you're using PDF Toolbox 14. Which brings us to David.
Yeah. And thank you for another illustration why I don't do anything with color. So this is much easier. There is a possibility in PDF Toolbox to extract a Dieline as another format, SVG, DXF, CF2, PDF, I think, but not PDF, not explicitly. But there is an action that allows you to do that. The only problem is in PDF Toolbox 13, it was said that all things are now accessible as an action. And so as an action, they can be used in a process plan, but this was an exception, as was pointed out to me multiple times by many different people, some of whom are in this room, repeatedly. This was not possible. And there was a technical explanation for it, but never mind. In PDF Toolbox 14, there is now a new action, extract Dieline, and then you have all the parameters that you would expect. And because it is an action, you can insert it in a process plan, and you can stop talking to me about it.
Okay, then that's me. Processing steps can now be switched off for Fixups. Maybe you remember that when we introduced PDF Toolbox 13, I told you now there is in the sidebar for checks, you have the ability to specify whether the check that you're currently creating is applied to objects on processing steps only or in addition to page objects or whatsoever. Yeah, so processing steps, as you probably know, is Dieline objects, for instance, on metadata, on layers with standardized metadata. And now the same pop-up is available for Fixups, so that you can also specify for a Fixup whether whatever change is specified is applied to processing steps objects as well. However, this is only available to certain Fixups, only to Fixups where we believe that really makes sense. Yeah? And that also has to do with the internal architecture. Fixups are not as generic as checks, so each Fixup is more or less developed by itself, and therefore we wanted to decide for which Fixups we wanted to do that effort. Yeah, and this is the list of Fixups where this pop-up is available for generating bleed at page edges, and more importantly for processing steps for irregular shapes, although because it's so important there, that already was somehow possible in the Fixup settings itself. For converting colors, of course, you wouldn't want to convert, or quite often you wouldn't want to convert colors, the Dieline color, for instance, while you would want to convert all the real colors on a page. When you map, spot, or process colors, you would want to exclude processing steps, if you modify overprinting or knockout, if you crop to visible based on the rendered page, you may want to ignore the legend, for instance, that is on a processing steps layer, and you don't want to take the legend into account when you crop the page or when you remove objects. Those are the fix-ups where this pop-up is available. Let us know if you believe there is you want to see some other fix-up on that list. That is definitely possible. That this list is what we believe what makes the most sense. Which brings us to the small penguin.
Very small feature, but nevertheless interesting. And I will show some of these things. I have another feature I want to demo, and then I will use that opportunity to also show some of these things, although this is quite straightforward. So when you have a process plan, on the right-hand side, you have the properties of the object that is selected. Here you have find images. And so on the right-hand side, you have the name of that, at least the check that is selected. And then you have some other stuff. One of the things that was added is the ability to restrict the execution of a check, but also a fix-up or a profile, to a page range. Page ranges were introduced also in 13, I believe, the expanded use of page ranges throughout the product. And so you can see an example there that I have added. This says -3 -1. If you don't know what that means, it means starting at the third last page up until the last page. So the pre-flight check is only going to be run on that. You could do something similar by including an additional condition in the check for sequential page number, but doing it this way is going to be faster and in a way also more convenient to set up than using sequential page number. So just open the process plan editor, select one of the elements, a check, a fix-up, or a profile, and you'll see this pages a property appear where you can have a page range.
Okay, next one, again, a tiny one, limit shape creation to pages. We have the create shapes feature, and up until pdfToolbox 14, when you create shapes on PDF pages, you always had to create them on all pages. Now we also here have a page selector. You can say, okay, I want to create shapes only on, in this example, odd pages or whatever page selectors are possible in pdfToolbox. So here in the shape creation feature, in create shape, you have this additional pop-up. Quick changes?
Yes, this was an easy one because I could just use the same screenshot, which is always appreciated. So another thing that was a limitation in process plans is that, well, when you create a check and you run a check by itself, it's always, and it creates a hit, it's always an error. And that is because the check by itself doesn't understand the concept of error warning or information that is normally applied in the profile. And you put the check in the profile, and then you can choose whether it's reported as a warning or an error. But that meant that in a process plan, a check was always reported as an error. And now in the same area on the right-hand side, where you can also play with this page range, you can see an additional new property called Severity, and that allows you to determine what the result is going to be. So if you want to generate a process plan that in the last step generates a warning instead of an error, then you can do that now by just making sure that the severity of that check is correct.
Oh, yeah. Next is create backgrounds, avoiding transparency interaction. Once in a while, there are some fix-ups in pdfToolbox that allow you to add a background to a page. Most importantly and straightforward is the add white background fix-up, but you could also do so in create and apply shapes. So sure, you can create a page, the fix-up that we've just seen, and then apply the shape so that a new background would be created behind existing page objects. Once in a while, assume you have on that page objects that are transparent. And remember that there are some strange blend modes even that create kind of unexpected results. So it may be the case, and this goes back to a customer case actually, where some object was completely invisible just because white background was inserted on that page, because that object used the blend mode screen, and the blend mode screen for this combination of a white background, with this combination of a white background, meant that the object that was then in the foreground just became invisible. Yeah? And then there is a solution for that. You would have to create for the existing content a transparency group and indicate that this transparency group is isolated. And that means there is no transparency interaction between the objects that existed before you inserted the new background. Yeah? In pdfToolbox 13, we already introduced a parameter for place content, which would allow you to do the same thing. Also, when placing content, you could specify that the placed content is put into an isolated transparency group. In pdfToolbox 14, this becomes also possible for objects that existed before you inserted that new background. So, and we try to come up with a name for this new option that is somewhat explanatory of what is happening. So, existing transparency and the existing transparent page content overlaps opacally, which basically says, okay, whatever existed beforehand, it interacts with a new background in an opaque way, so basically no transparency takes place. Next one.
Okay. This is also one that comes from questions from customers. There is a possibility in pdfToolbox, and I will immediately go to pdfToolbox for this. If I would have it open, that would have been better. There is a possibility in pdfToolbox to add pages and or insert new pages. I believe the Fixup is used, and in that you had the option to say, of course, where the page needs to be included and how many pages you want, and you can also say whether you want to copy the existing page content or not. What you could not do, and which in some cases was a limitation, was determine which page content would be copied and which page content would not be copied. And that in pdfToolbox 14 you can do, because there is an additional filter condition here that says accept page objects, and then you can use a pre-flight check to determine which objects will not be copied to the new page. So I have a page with a whole bunch of stuff on it. I want to create a duplicate of that page, but I'm not interested in the text, for example. Then I can configure that the way I have configured it here. I have a pre-flight check that that searches for text. And now let me see if I have a file for that, so that I can also show you. That should be this one. Yeah, and it's a Fixup, so we're going to do tests. So I have a page that contains, in this particular example, mostly vector art and text. And then when I have my inserted page, so at the top, I also have a bunch of text on there. My copy that was created is everything I had before, with the exception of the text. And of course, I can now modify that if I don't want these images. The two barcodes here are images. If I don't want that, then I just have to modify that pre-flight check that I had there. Yeah. And anything that you can do with a pre-flight check to filter will then work. While I am in pdfToolbox, let me just select something here and also show you what I talked about previously. So this is the page selector, where I can say all or even or odd or any of the page selection things that are available. And then when I select a check, I also have this new severity, where I can choose either one of error warning info, or I can select a variable to make the result of a variable. Okay, so go back here and use my newfound knowledge, and we go back to the bicycle.
Yeah. Switch configurators. So we know that pdfToolbox is quite often used in Switch, and if you would use pdfToolbox, you would usually use it via our configurators. A few words on these configurators. We are working on pdfToolbox 14 configurators, and we will make them available soon. So they are not there yet. We're working on it, and I don't know, it will be a matter of weeks, and then they will be available. If you want to start pdfToolbox 14 in Switch tomorrow, there is no issue. Actually, you can use pdfToolbox 13 configurators without any issues. They will work. We've tested that. You just have to adjust the path to the application. You have to manually adjust the path to use pdfToolbox 14. Once we've created the configurators and once they are available, not much will actually change. The only thing that will change is you will have access to the new JSON options that Sarah explained and shown to you this morning. Yeah? So if you say, I don't know, I don't use these options anyway, you could as well say, okay, I'm fine with what I have. I keep using pdfToolbox 13 configurators, and there is no reason to not doing that. Yeah? In parallel, we already started working on Switch apps. Yeah? And then Switch apps are, from the architectural internal Switch point of view, something completely different technology. So this will require more time for us, more in terms of 2 or more months, and then we will make them available. Yeah? And the reason, apps, you probably know, configurators are available in Switch from the application, while apps are available via Enfocus App Store. You probably know that stuff better than I do. I don't know whether Enfocus will make some transition for you, for your flow, so whether it is somehow possible to replace all configurators with the corresponding app, or whether that would be manual work for you to, I don't know, draw the app onto into your Switch flow and then draw the connections again. That I don't know. That obviously would have to happen in Switch. The only thing that I know is that apps are the preferred way to integrate for Enfocus, and it's also the more powerful way. So we are happy to do that, and we're working on it. Yeah. And then that also means for us, of course, in future versions of pdfToolbox, we will probably decide. So probably we won't for, let's say, pdfToolbox 15, probably there will not be any configurators anymore. Probably then you will only have access to apps. Yeah, that most probably, that is what I can say today. The other feature is, I think it's just one slide. Compared to the amount of slides, it was a lot of work. You can use pdfToolbox on macOS ARM computers, on the M1 chips already. However, there they would run in Rosetta mode, which still is quite fast. Starting with pdfToolbox 14, it's also possible to use them in native mode, which makes them even faster. The only downside is the installers are universal, so the installer contains both flavors, the old flavor for the Intel-based architecture and the new flavor for the ARM-based architecture, which means the installers are roughly 1.8 gigabyte big. Nothing we can do about that, which brings us to David.
Yeah, with my support hat on, when you're playing with Switch and you do set path to application, could you please make sure that you point it to the CLI application and not to the desktop application? That is still one of the very frequent questions that we get from people. If you get some strange result from pdfToolbox, then it's probably the desktop that you've selected. So, that said, again, about process plans, one of the sometimes frustrating things is that if a process plan is not complete, and you can see an example of that here, this is not complete because there is a fixup in there that doesn't have all the connections that it is supposed to have. If a process plan is not complete, then you could not save it in pdfToolbox 13. And that means that you start doing something and then you realize that you first need to create something else that you have forgotten and that you need to test. So you need to close the process plan editor again, and you can't because it is not complete. So either you fake something at that point or you just lose your changes and then you have to redo them afterwards. In pdfToolbox 14, even though there is this exclamation mark that says this is not good, you can still save the process plan. There is also an indication in the list of profiles and process plans that something is wrong with it, but you can at least save it and then continue editing later. Barcodes.
Yeah, one feature that I believe doesn't require much explanation. You don't have to even do something in order to use it. I mean, the only thing that you would have to do is you would use the check find barcodes, and then it will just find more barcodes on the page than it did in pdfToolbox 13. I have an example here. I hope that you can see that this is an edge case of a barcode. It's more something like a line code or a curve code or whatsoever. It's a really bad scan. However, and in pdfToolbox 13, the pdfToolbox 13 would just say, okay, there aren't any barcodes. In pdfToolbox 14, it is now possible to detect such barcodes. So find barcodes would analyze the whole page and would find the barcode. So this is just an excerpt of an A4 page. It would find that barcode in the on the left-hand side and would accurately read the value in there. And if I just take the support hat from David hats and put it on mine, I also want to provide you with some explanation about how to use that check, that check find barcodes. Once in a while, we see the question that someone does not just want to know the value of the barcode, but maybe also bar width reduction value and the module widths and whatsoever. So more parameters that are encoded into the barcode, and that can actually be derived using pdfToolbox. The trick here on the left-hand side, you see the simple check find barcode, and that would give you here the value of the barcode, and in the trigger value only find barcodes is not true, which was as it was set up. But you can have much more information in here in the trigger values, and that is if you would use more barcode conditions. Yeah, so I was using here module width of the barcode is greater than 0, bar width reduction is greater than 0, and then you will see all that information. Yeah, that is a way to have that in the trigger values, and if it's in the trigger values, you have it in the reports that generated, you have it in the JavaScript object, so you have access to that information. That's still me, make even smaller JPEG 2000 images. It's possible with pdfToolbox 13 to convert all images in a PDF file to JPEG 2000. And JPEG 2000 is a much more powerful compression algorithm, so the quality is better and the file size is smaller. So you're able to get to much smaller PDF files, and that algorithms that are used are more powerful in pdfToolbox 14. So again, nothing that you would be able to change even if you would want to. But if you want to if you would use the action resample to JPEG 2000, you would do that for one customer file that I've gotten with pdfToolbox 13. It would give you just 1 megabyte, so it would downsample, and the original had 428 megabytes, the result has 427. With pdfToolbox 14, it turned out to be almost just 50% of the original file. Yeah, so much smaller. You wouldn't do so for print files, but you would do so for online publishing files, so files that should be as small as possible. The results, so that I can also say, what I was using is these settings that you see here. So the target resolution is 100 ppi. However, I said retain original image resolution. The original used 300 ppi, and the result used 300 ppi. So this dramatic reduction wasn't achieved by reducing the image resolution. It was just the image codec that was used to encode the image. It's just a better compression algorithm. And also the quality wasn't, at least from my point of view, wasn't any less good as the original. And that's very good.
Very small thing. Again, something that can save you a lot of time if you need it. There are some settings, and one of the prime examples is map colors. So if you have the map colors Fixup, you have a section where you specify what needs to be done, and that section became more complex in pdfToolbox 14 because you now have more tolerance values and so on. As you can see, it's quite a lot of values. And you have at the bottom this little plus and minus where you can add additional mappings to it. But the additional mapping that you generate is always empty. So you have to configure one, then you add a new one. You have to completely configure that one as well. There is now also a duplicate button in there, so you can configure one, and then when you duplicate, at least you have only the things to change that are really different. But most of the settings that you've set up can be duplicated. And then the other ones, of course, still function just as before, and you can still have empty ones if you just click the plus that hasn't changed.
Another one, I believe, short one, at least one with no options. In a compare report, so you can compare to PDF files, you can compare original and result, and that is based on internal rendering and pixel comparison. Up until pdfToolbox 14, and you can create a report for that, and that report up until pdfToolbox 14 always contained all pages of the two PDF files. So even if you have, let's say, 200 pages, and on page 111 there's a difference, you would get a report consisting of 200 pages, and then you would have to scroll to page 111 in order to see where the difference was. In pdfToolbox 14, now you would get a report that consists of only one page. The one page would tell you I'm representing page 111 of the original and of the comparison file, and here is the difference. So you are immediately, the report is immediately reduced to those pages that actually have differences. If there aren't any differences, no report will be generated. Instead, you would see a message as the one that you can see here. Yeah.
You should all know test mode because it is amazing when you're working to create new fixups and checks and process plans and so on. One of the things that you'll notice in test mode for pdfToolbox 14 is that at the bottom there, and you see the screenshot, there is now also a setting to restrict what is going to be executed. And this can be quite useful. It means if you have a 10,000 page file, but you know that you want to use test mode and the result is essentially going to be the same for all pages, then you could restrict it to just page 1 or maybe the first 10 pages to have some buffer. But at least it's not going to run every time you click test, it's not going to run over all 10,000 pages. Very small thing, very useful, especially if you often deal with large files. Remember the VDP session. If you have that type of document, then well, you now have the tools to support that a little bit easier. If it is a VDP file, you also have access to enable the fast VDP mode here in test mode so that you can see whether that works as well.